Welcome, and thank you for joining us for our 2-minute warning feature interview, which is part of our energy transition series, where every week we take a deep dive and look into the challenges and some of the solutions that are being put out there by corporates and countries to tackle this new challenge of the energy transition. And we are delighted to have joining us today for the feature interview Mr. 𝗘𝗳𝗃𝗏𝗆, who is the Senior Policy Advisor at the Ministry of Ecological and Inclusive Transition in France. Thank you very much, Mr. 𝗘𝗃𝗏𝗆, for joining us.
Good morning. It's a pleasure for me to be with you.
Thank you. And I suppose I'm going to start our discussion by asking you a question which has probably been put to you a few times the last year, and you've probably been tackling as part of your own challenges within your organization and the ministry, which is the pandemic. And we're still in it. We're not out of it. Perhaps a few months ago, people may have thought we would have been out of it by now, but we're not. And how has that impacted on a bigger picture level the investment towards energy efficiency measures?
Well, the pandemic has impacted every single businesses that we know of, every single companies, every single government, every single decision. And of course, the field of energy efficiency, making every energy system consuming less energy, has also been impacted. We've noticed, though, that there was a little slowdown in energy efficiency investment and impact over the past few years. And despite we need energy efficiency for the big energy transition globally, we are not at all at the pace that we need to see on energy efficiency. But this lockdown has definitely reduced the investment that we need to see in energy efficiency. Is that a problem? Yes, it is a problem, but I hope that above all, the pandemic will teach us that we need to think the world differently. We need to think the world in a global manner. We need to accept that what was impossible, a global lockdown of our economy, has become possible. And I think we also ignore the warning of some of the scientists who were telling us that, if we continue, we can face a pandemic. And drawing lessons from that mean that maybe we'll have to accept that some other scientific issues, such as climate change, is real and need a serious change in the way we manage the energy system, in the way we use energy. And,
well, I mean, that's, yeah, and I'll just join there. I mean, yes, certainly the pandemic has had a lot of impacts on CapEx. If you look at it from a broad brush stroke of CapEx, energy companies, companies in general, corporates have had to cut their expenditure one way or another because of a drop in business. But the climate change argument has been given sort of a new focus in the last year, you could argue, as a result of the pandemic, the impact on the climate itself, just from people locking down and what we saw from that. And on the financial front, when we all watch the markets as they're reeling upwards, we've also seen a lot of talk of a lot of new money going into transition technologies, companies who are backing those solutions. But just to go back to the investment point of view, and again, maybe you can talk a bit about the projects and initiatives that your ministry is pursuing on that front. Would you say the business case has clearly been made for implementing efficiency technologies into things like buildings and operations, or is there still some doubt that actually the alternative makes better business sense?
What I see is that despite all what we know about the benefits, the beauty of energy efficiency, we are not investing at all at the pace of what we should, of what we know of the potential. We know that there is a potential in buildings, in industry, in transport, in agriculture, in the energy sector. but we are still behind the potential when we look at the investment. So I think we have not yet made energy efficiency a priority. I must say that.
Why is that? Why is that? Why are we not in this day and age getting there at the right pace?
Because energy efficiency is complex, because energy efficiency is difficult, because energy efficiency can only happen when you address several small steps and bring them all together, because energy efficiency is just one decision. Energy efficiency is always a result of a combination of a new technology, a new management of the technology, and the behavior of the users. You combine all that with the fact that for some of the solution, we need some specific investment. And this is why we have to accept that energy efficiency is a very specific aspect of the energy transition. And if we don't invest in the ingredients for energy efficiency, the first of the ingredients is to develop the visibility, the data, the knowledge to collect information about where do we consume energy, in which quantity, at what time, and so on. As long as we don't have the basic data, you cannot expect that individuals, communities, or businesses will pay attention and spontaneous invest in energy efficiency. Well, so this is one of the reasons, complexity.
About that, obviously to gather data, you need certain instruments, you need technologies there for data gathering. Certainly, you cannot argue that it's not there. It's actually becoming more affordable. We've seen it work, obviously, in many circumstances. So, connected devices, smart systems, you name it, whether it's in power grids or whether it's in the efficiency of how a building operates. So we can collect the data. And I mean, are you seeing a divergence within certain countries, perhaps, as to what extent this argument is being used? In France, give us an example in France, which has always been obviously an advanced economy and certainly one that supports technology. Are you facing that problem in France itself?
I'm not sure that despite the fast development of the IT, of the Internet of Things, of big data and machine learning, we still have yet in front of us on our radar screen all the elements to help us take the decision. Let me choose yourself. What will it take to challenge you, to help you make a decision and make you as an individual invest in energy efficiency, in the way you behave at home, at work, in your transport? Do you see the incentive in your daily life to help you consume less energy? I'm not sure about that, because there's always an excuse, and we don't understand the energy bill that we receive. We don't compare, when we go to the gas station, whether our car or the way we drive our car is energy efficient or not. So there is all this drive that we don't have yet. And this, before we even reach individuals, I think we still need to reach communities, businesses, to bring in further of them the indicators of performance, the indicators of energy efficiency. We need to collect data, but we need to transform the data into knowledge. And this is also where we still miss some ingredients of energy efficiency. Those are the tools to help us understand and appreciate energy efficiency. The tools are the indicators, the certification, the standard, the rating, the labeling. The more we have such a tool in our daily environment for decision making, the better it is for energy efficiency. So you see, this is part of the complexity of energy efficiency.
Yeah. So I mean, and a lot of those tools that you mentioned fall under, can fall under regulation, obviously, and policy and legislation. And what will it take? I mean, you look at the EU just as an example, as a bloc, for example. Are we going to have to all agree? Are all the European countries going to have to agree on a common legislation towards this, or can individual countries go ahead of the other? Who would you say globally, where do you see the most advanced case of legislation and policy pushing these tools to be effective, if at all?
Many countries have developed over the past 20, 30, 40 years some sort of regulation to encourage energy efficiency. The most impactful one are the one imposing thermal regulation on buildings. New construction cannot be built today the way they were built 50 years ago, because you have to accept, respect, it's mandatory, some level of insulation, design, and so on. So building regulation was one of the first set of policy. A second set of policy was on traded goods, on appliances, equipment. You know, you cannot buy a fridge or an air conditioner in the world now without some sort of labeling. But there was a cost, there was some investment from government to put in place this rating, labeling, standard, and certification scheme that has played a huge role in supporting energy efficiency. But we are still missing a lot of those elements. In terms of global policy, I must say that Europe is providing an excellent enabling environmental, an excellent policy framework. We have what we call European law, called directives, and above the laws that try to develop energy efficiency proposal for traded goods, typically cars and transport, our vehicles, but also buildings and industry. We have some targets. The European Commission has some targets, and not only some targets for energy efficiency, but with renewable energy and with greenhouse gas emission. Can you believe that the European Commission recently accepted to set 55% the target for the European economy on greenhouse gas emission by 2030?
Yeah, these targets are being brought forward in many cases.
And you have target, then you give a signal to the market player, to the economy, to the people, to the businesses. Then you develop the policy framework to give visibility to the ingredients of this transition.
We've had a few guests on this particular program who have said that these 20, 30-year targets are just far too long term. And we need, and yes, you can have your 10, 20-year target, of course, in terms of achieving your climate goals as a whole, but we need 1 year, 2 year, 5 year plans to really force this to be effective. What's it going to take to actually do that?
I fully agree with what you said, that targets are not enough. I must say that they're very much welcome, because we know where we need to go by 2050, at least in terms of climate change. We also know the potential of typically what energy efficiency is, and the potential is big. So we have to combine the two to set some intermediate targets. But the most important for me is not to set targets, is to give the means to support the transition. And what I'm here to support is the idea that we can deliver on energy efficiency, but sometimes we are missing the political support that comes along with the financial support. We need to finance the enabling environment of energy efficiency. There is nothing spontaneous with energy efficiency because it is complex. Mm-hmm. So I am more interested to see government provide financial support, put in place specific capacities like institutional capacity. I am encouraging that energy efficiency receive some support to establish institutions, human capacity. We need to train people at all levels. We need people to develop the enabling environment, the policy. Then we need to experiment. You cannot develop a policy that will impose to all the players a given energy efficiency requirement. You have to impose, so you have to test. You see, there's this type of financial support that is needed. So there is a whole range of intervention that government and policy, and I think the role of regulation is very important. But more than regulation is the means that government are placing into the field.
And I mean, the means is as well, the funding is all about, injecting cash into these initiatives and solutions. Do you see that trend improving at all? As you said, people are making, what is the business case for it? You're going to invest in it as a business if you see you're going to make profit at the end of the day and achieve your objectives. From a government funding point of view, in this region, we've seen a lot of commitment into this is an oil and gas producing region with plenty of energy, etc., and income and revenue, as you mentioned earlier on. But there's some serious initiatives going towards renewables where that's applicable. Hydrogen, of course, is a new case in point, and a lot of investment going into that globally. And obviously there's battery cars and all these different efficiencies in terms of goals towards climate change. But where do you see the sort of green construction retrofit solution model taking off? I mean, is it just a matter of funding? It's a mindset. You mentioned jobs as well and skill sets. How critical is that to getting this all off the ground, the training for and the understanding of these solutions?
There are many questions in your reaction here. This is a world of competition. And I must say that energy efficiency competes with other elements of the energy transition. You mentioned renewable energy, you mentioned hydrogen, I can mention carbon capture and storage, I can mention nuclear power. All those aspects, are attracting funding from government, are attracting support from government. They're also attracting the interest of some investors, and the private sector can see some benefits, some short-term benefits in investing in renewable energy or carbon capture and storage and hydrogen, because they see there is a business case. There is less a vision of this on energy efficiency, because as I said, energy efficiency is granular, it's scattered, it's a complex result of technology, policy, and individual behavior change. So this is where energy efficiency needs some specific assistance. And in this world of competition, sometimes I wish that government, whenever they decide to support hydrogen or carbon capture and storage of renewable, all this is very much welcome. I wish they could also understand that energy efficiency requires specific attention because of the uniqueness of energy efficiency. There is a promise, and one of the promises of energy efficiency, it has multiple benefits. We need energy efficiency because by reducing the energy we consume for each level of services that we need services. We need heat, cold, mobility, communication, light. Those are the services that energy delivers. We can deliver the services consuming less energy. So by energy efficiency, you can reduce the energy bill. You can reduce the associated greenhouse gas emission. You can reduce the pollution. Look at the pollution in our cities. We can have modern cities, but we can't breathe sometimes the air. And not only because of the cars, because also of space heating and so on. So by improving energy efficiency, we reduce the pollution, and we have health issues. We improve productivity. I know many cases where energy efficiency is industry. The most important impact was increased productivity. We know that the productivity of workers in energy efficient buildings is higher because the comfort has improved. And one important aspect, especially in this pandemic world, it's energy efficiency can provide huge job creation. And this is maybe the #1 argument that we can bring. But this job creation will not happen spontaneously. And this is where we need to understand.
We have an IEA, I have a figure here in front of me, IEA recent report estimating that energy-related stimulus spending, that it can generate an equivalent of nearly 2 million jobs now in the next 2 years. Again, we were talking about short-term targets. So given that, and given, for example, the macroeconomic problems that governments are facing now as a result of this pandemic in terms of employment, job creation, it's really a no-brainer. There seems to be a resistance to it still. As you said, it's a knowledge issue. Are people really still unaware of what the benefits could be of this? What is the sticking point that we have to get over? What is the main hurdle that we need to overcome to speed this up?
Let me take one example: buildings. In most European countries and in many countries around the world, buildings represent the biggest greenhouse gas reduction potential that we know of. Existing buildings, not new buildings. Yeah. New buildings can be designed very energy efficiently, and we have regulation for that. But we know that we now have to tap existing building through what we call retrofit.
Yeah. And
we can develop deep retrofitting in everywhere. But to get there, it is on the radar and it is on the agenda of every European government. Typically in the French government, we know that we have to reduce by half, and there is some targets. But what it takes to really engage the transition in deep renovation, it takes that you have to have the will to impose, to mandate the trends. We have seen cases where renovation of buildings is being supported by some incentive. But let's face it, financial incentive is not enough. There are some beautiful cases across Europe where you have massive incentive from government. You have tax reduction here, you have some VAT reduction there, there's some white energy efficiency certificates. It looks like incentive for deep renovation is not enough. And I am among the people, and we are pushing hard with to think that this is when we need some regulation. We need some mandatory regulation. Typically, when an apartment or a building is empty, when there is a trade, a change of ownership, this is where, when it is empty, that we need to invest. But you cannot make, a government cannot make mandatory if you don't support with a proper technical package, with a proper technical know-how. You have to have the skills and a proper financial package. You have also, it is very important to make sure that the incentive, the specific loans, maybe zero interest loans. This is one of the fancy solutions that we are looking closely in Europe. Zero interest loan is properly packaged. You don't want to impose something if the market is not ready, if typically there's no know-how. It is, making.
You're talking about the government side of things, macro policy, regulations, etc. That can, as you said, some things will have to be imposed for change to happen. Is the private sector on the other side ready to provide all these solutions and ready to make its own investment, if you like? This marrying of the public and private partnership that we see a lot of more of here in this region, which is where there's newer projects, if you like, on this front. Is there a natural sort of public-private partnership model that is also working within Europe?
Well, I'm a policymaker. This is my background. This is what I've been doing, okay? And I think we can attract the private sector, we can attract businesses, we can create the condition, but it is not spontaneous. So I think the vision of government, the regulatory framework, a stable regulatory framework with a proper set of tools and instruments, from technical instruments to human instruments. Training is very important. Training of the architect, of all the building people is very important. And the putting in place the proper financial instrument. This package has to be organized in a smart way and led by government. Of course, this package can be designed with a proper dialogue with industry. What prevents banks for providing loans to a company that want to retrofit. What prevent loans? What prevent banks? They are risk adverse. Investors, banks are risk adverse. And if they are not 100% sure that the investment in a retrofitting of a building will really achieve the saving that we hope, as long as there is not this visible part, and this is where you see we need all the instrument of rating, certification, labeling, and so on. And I hope here I touch the reason why I believe that at the background of all this, a common vision supported by some specific financial support to put in place capacities, technical, human, institutional, legal, and financial capacities. I don't think we can expect the private sector to lead. I have no problem, and I'm fully convinced that the private sector can come big, but
yeah, it has to be a top-down approach and then source. And let me ask you one more question, Mr. Lebeau, before you wrap up, in terms of this top-down approach and getting the private sector also to participate, obviously, and to invest as well. The difference between trying to implement these solutions, for example, between developed economies such as those in Europe and Africa, for example, we have a lot of developing economies. The advantage there, you could argue, is that there's a lot of new building to do. There's a lot of transport infrastructure still from scratch. And so they can speedily get there much more quickly. Would you agree? But is the model there for the public policy to also work and for the private sector to be as enthusiastic?
I'm so pleased that you finish on that question, because this is very important to my heart, that we live in a global world, in a global economy, and yes, good examples have to spread. And I wish we could make sure that all the decisions made by the rich world will find ways to be brought rapidly and exported to where we have even a bigger potential for energy efficiency. We know that typically the biggest potential for energy efficiency is in the fast developing economy, in the emerging world. And yes, but what it takes here is to have some institution to support the dialogue, to support international collaboration. Typically, there is international collaboration on hydrogen, renewable energy, on carbon capture and storage. Have you heard about international cooperation on energy efficiency, where we could just exchange good practice, avoid countries to develop their own policy, their own tool? We can just translate, copy, paste, good example, good legislation. I have seen, this is something I've done in my life. When I was a young engineer, I took part in the definition of the labeling of appliances in Europe. Mm-hmm. I was at the very heart of the design of a label that is A, B, C, D on fridge, air conditioner, and so on. Now this label that we implemented, that we designed for the European consumers, this label is being copied and used in 30 different countries, from Russia to Kenya to South Africa to Brazil, Argentina, Latin America. That means this is an example that when a good policy is well established, it can spread. And this is really a wish that I have for the world, that we make energy efficiency a fuel, that we support that fuel with a proper institution at national level, but that also we accelerate the spread of good practice through international collaboration. And I'm very happy to finish on that note, because I believe that there is a great deal of, we can accelerate energy efficiency if we indeed provide this field of the energy transition full support. We have I think we can develop the vision. The time has come to think big. We have to draw lessons from the pandemic, that in this global economy, we have to continue international collaboration. There is a lack of understanding of energy efficiency. So I hope this exchange has at least helped facilitate spread what energy efficiency is unique and what it needs. So anyway, this is thank you for offering me this last question.
Thank you very much. Thank you to Mr. Benoît Lebeau, Senior Policy Advisor at the Ministry of Ecological and Inclusive transition in France. Thank you very much, Mr. 𝗘𝗲, for your insight. And as you said, a lot of good example to spread across the world, and it's not necessary to reinvent the wheel, as they say, but cooperate. And as we've seen a lot of that, obviously, in the last year under very dire circumstances. So we can do it. Thank you very much, Mr. 𝗘𝗲. Thank you for joining us.